What is up, and welcome back to Beyond the Arc with Brandon Silvers. As always, I am your host, Brandon Silvers. Got an extra special episode for you. By now, you know I love sports, love talking about sports, love talking about the many different aspects of sports. And the most fun sports talk, in my opinion, is talking to people about their favorite teams. My favorite team ever is also my first favorite team, and I would not be talking about sports if it wasn't for them existing. The Clutch City Houston Rockets, who won the 94 and 95 NBA championships. Got the Hakeem shirt on if you're on YouTube. So I could talk about them for hours, but why do that when I can talk about them with H-Town's very own super cool dude, producer, world traveler, consultant, analyst, KP, aka Fried Drexler. Fried, man, thank you for joining me.
For sure. I appreciate it, man.
Yes, sir.
You having me on. Yeah.
So let's start off. We're gonna get to my fandom. Don't worry about it. When did you become a Houston Rockets fan?
Well, I grew up, in the South, Houston. So it's like it's a football town. It's a football state. So I probably grew up, I started watching, sports probably in the early 70s, which was really baseball. So I played baseball, Pee Wee, Little League, and I had my grandpops used to take me to the Astros games. Like this was like early 70s, 73, 74. So I was going to see the Astros early. I didn't get into basketball until maybe a few years after that. My uncles were really into it because you got to remember back then, you could only watch local teams on TV. So they didn't have all the other games were tape delayed. They came on like after, kids went to sleep at night. So they didn't have live games. So you didn't get to see the Lakers and the whatever. This was like in the early 70s. So the first remembrance that I remember of the Rockets were, I used to see these pamphlets because my uncles used to go to the games, and they used to have this white dude on the pamphlet. And this may have been like 74, 75. This guy's name was Mike Newland. So I'm going to go through a lot of names here, and you're going to have to like kind of maybe take them down because I want you to look some of them up.
Definitely.
Some of these guys up. But he was on the cover of the brochure. Now, he wasn't really like the star of the team per se, but it was a white dude that they put on the cover of the brochure. The probably the most popular player back then was probably Calvin Murphy. And, he was real popular in the community. He was a baton twirler. So he had a group called the Marching Thunder. And they had drummers, like it was like a drumline group with majorettes and girls twirling batons, and he was the lead baton twirler.
That is wild.
Calvin Murphy is a super dude on with a baton, twirling baton. I mean, anybody from Houston knows this, but it's like he was like the guy on the team back then. So they had Rudy T. He was on the team. Rudy Tomjanovich. He was on the team. He wasn't a star, but he was, you knew his name. Like you would hear his name on the news and stuff. But that was my first remembrance of the Rockets until they got Moses. And then when they got Moses, they were popular in the city because he was popular, like nationally. Like, you couldn't go anywhere because they talked about Moses because he was the leading rebounder in the league. Like when he came into the Rockets, he came from the ABA, and he was probably in his third year when he got to the Rockets, third or fourth year as a pro. And he came in and he averaged, I think, 14 rebounds a game like the first year. So
one of the game's
like
forgotten superstars, like super underrated all time.
Oh, man. I mean, I knew about Moses like before all that Philly shit, like before he got to Philly, and he was the man to us back then. I mean, he was super raw, and yeah, he was, he couldn't talk worth a damn, but he was the man, so back then they had another guy named Dwight Jones who was from the city. So a lot of people knew about him. They followed the Rockets because of him. And they after about around that time they got John Lucas.
Mm.
So he came to the Rockets as a rookie. So he was popular, before he got into drugs and shit. So they were a good team, around that time. And I was probably watching a little bit of it then, because of Moses. But, I wasn't into like any of the other teams until the 80s, like the early 80s. I really started watching basketball when Magic and Bird played in that one final.
Got
That
you.
was like 79, maybe 78. Um, that was really big because that was like a nationally televised game. Everybody was into it because it was a white dude that could play, you know. Because back then, when you live in the hood, you only think brothers can hoop. You don't see on TV. You hear about these dudes, like we heard about like Bob Cousy and all that shit, but we never saw white dudes that could really play until Bird came. When Bird came, dude, it was like crazy.
I
Right.
just heard a great story about this today. It was
Right.
Nolan Richardson was talking about him.
Uh-huh.
The old Arkansas coach was talking about he was driving through a town where Indiana State was playing. And he was
Uh-huh.
listening on the radio, and
Right.
all it was like, Bird goes left. Oh, Bird goes right. And he was like, man, this dude, Bird, this brother here is cold.
Right.
He said he woke up the next day, and before this, he hadn't seen him. He opened the newspaper and saw who Bird was, and he said, I
Right.
was like, damn.
Damn.
He couldn't believe a white boy was doing that.
Right. And this was like when I started watching, when it was that year that they went to the finals, because they were showing their games on, like, you would only see college basketball games on Saturdays. uh they didn't It was no cable, so you didn't see national games unless it was Saturday afternoon. They would have a game at like 12 noon or something, and they would always show a lot of the same teams. So back then they would always show like UCLA, they would show Notre Dame, they would show this was before the Big East was popping. This was before all that shit. Like the teams that I knew about, and when I started buying those magazines, like when I was like 12 years old, I started buying those Street and Smith magazines.
Yes, sir.
And I remember the first magazine I bought was probably, and this was my favorite player, Rod Foster was on the cover. He used to play guard for UCLA. And he was like the best player that I knew about because he was on the cover of that magazine. And I just started following him. Right. But they had a lot of different players in the magazines, like for Puka, a gang of, all these players, you know what I'm saying? So that's when I really started paying attention to basketball, was when Bird came and Magic. And then I knew about it, you know, before then. I knew about it because of the Rockets, because of Moses, and they went to the finals in like 81. So it was big. It was huge when they played the Celtics. I knew about other players in the division too. Like I knew about Gervin, like
Mm.
George Gervin, because he played for the Spurs. So they would play them on TV locally. You would see that game a lot. So you would see them play them. So I knew about their players. The Kansas City Kings had players. They were in the division. This was back when it was still the New Orleans Jazz. I mean, you were seeing like Pete Maravich back. I mean, I remember seeing Pete Maravich back in the 70s play. So before he died, so there were a lot of players that I saw just by the division, just because the Rockets played in that division with the Spurs and the Jazz and all these other players. But yeah, so then, when they had Moses, and they actually, they made it to the finals one year. They played the Celtics. They got beat, bad, because that was like McHale's rookie year, I think. They had Bird, they had Parrish.
Parrish, yep.
let me see who else they had. I had a list here. They had oh my God, Tiny Archibald was on the team.
I forgot
Um,
he finished up there.
I mean, he was a long time Celtic before he went around and he came back. Cornbread Maxwell was on that team. They had uh oh man, this dude, Rick Roby. I put his name down because this dude was like one of those just enforcer white dudes
Yep.
like that you hated. I mean, and we hated. I mean, I grew up hating the Celtics because of that series. Like that started me to hating the Celtics. Because once you get into the 82, 83, you only had three teams that you could root for, like when we were kids. Like when I was 12 years old, it was only three teams: Philly, Celtics, Lakers. So once you got into the playoffs, you could root for your home team, but then when basketball was on TV, this is when basketball started coming on TV. They would show the playoffs on TV live. You only had three teams that we really, it was either everybody hated the Celtics if you were black, for sure. I didn't meet a Celtic fan till I got to college. Like seriously. Like all my cousins were Philly fans. A couple of my cousins were Laker fans. And, we were all Rocket fans until the playoffs came around, but then when it came to those three teams, you kind of had to pick when you're watching the playoffs, because we all watching it on TV, and everybody wanted the Celtics to lose. So you either jocked on the Philly or LA. Like that was it. Like at the end. But yeah, so after they made it to the finals, I was really into basketball then in early 80s, because then the Phi Slamma Jamma came.
Yes.
And I went to high school, like 2 blocks from U of H and 2 blocks from a SWAC school. So my high school was in between Texas Southern and U of H, like right in between. So I went to SWAC games. I went to U of H college games. I saw all of them. Like, dude from my high school, Justice Winslow that plays in the NBA.
Yeah.
That went to Duke. His dad went to my high school.
Okay.
When I was in the 9th grade, he was a senior. And he went to U of H. Ricky Winslow. He was part of Phi Slamma Jamma, the second part after they lost. But yeah, so after that, I was really into basketball. I got into it, and then they got Ralph,
Yes. So that's kind of where this era starts for me, is right around the drafting of Hakeem. But of course, first they brought in Ralph Sampson.
Yeah, because it was so bad.
Yes. Back-to-back number 1 picks.
Yeah, 82, 83, they were like, I wrote it down, 14 and 68.
Good Lord. Because Moses left. He went to Philly.
Moses left. They had Jelly Bean Bryant was on the team. They had Elvin Hayes in his later years. So they were doing pretty bad those early 80 years, so until they got Ralph. When they got him, they had that first year they were bad. They were still bad, but they had a coin flip for the first pick. I think when they got Hakeem, I think there was like a coin flip.
Yep.
It was them and somebody else.
Them in Portland.
Him in Portland, right? And
Portland got Bowie, and then Bulls got Jordan. Well, let's go back to Ralph real quick, because we were just talking about this. For those who don't remember or didn't know Ralph Sampson, right, you made a very good comparison to a current player that I liked, if you want to share it with the crowd.
Wemby.
Yes. I don't know why I haven't seen more of that.
Nah, Wemby is he's more athletic and more fluid. But Ralph could do some of the things Wemby, I mean, he can do all, and his post game was better. Like he had a turnaround jumper, he had a hook shot. He had, he could face the basket. So he was like the first big man that tall in a long time that a lot of people saw that he could bring the ball up the court. He could dribble between his legs. He could do all that shit. Like he was blocking shots.
Another 7'4" guy. And
he was 7'4". Yep.
Three-time Naismith College Player of the Year at Virginia.
3 times. Yeah.
But him having those skills like Wemby has, that really let the Rockets draft Hakeem because they could just slide 7-4 Ralph. He wanted to play power forward more anyway, right?
Yeah, he didn't want to play center. So when they got him, they had him playing center because that's all they had. You know. So when the gripe was if they could get the first pick, they had to take Hakeem because Ralph didn't like playing center. So that's a lot of the reason they passed on a couple of those other guys because,
man,
like Jordan wasn't really. He was good. He was the man coming out, but Hakeem was like thought of as the man too. Like a lot of people don't know he was the man too. Like he had went to three straight, Final Fours. He had went to three straight. They lost to North Carolina in the first one, the 81-82 in the Superdome. They lost to North Carolina in that one. But and then they lost to Valvano, and then they lost to Georgetown. When they had Ewing and Michael Graham.
So like Hakeem, I mean, that's a testament to Hakeem right there, is that he was drafted ahead of Jordan and no one says anything about it. But like you said, not a hometown guy, came from Nigeria, but went to school there in Houston. So how hype was the city to get to draft him?
They were hype. I mean, it was like once Ralph was talking about like, I don't want to play center, because I don't even think Bowie was on the radar, dude. Like, he was a hooper. Like, I know he was legit because I remember watching him. I remember Kentucky back then, Mel Turpin.
Dinner Bell Mel.
Yep. But it was Hakeem because he was hometown. Like, and everybody knew he was going to only get better because he was so raw when he first came. Like,
he didn't start playing until he was 15 or 16.
No, he was playing soccer, volleyball, all this other shit.
Yes.
Like when he was in Nigeria, he didn't play basketball. He started playing late. But then when he first came to like U of H, I watched a couple of his games, like the first game he actually came into the game, he wasn't a starter. He didn't start like the first year. Like, he was still like off the bench. But when he would come into the game, he was like a lightning bolt. Like, he would have like 3 or 4 blocks. He would have like 2 or 3 dunks in like 4 minutes and shit. People were like, God damn. Like,
flying around the court. Imagine,
and he didn't really know how to play.
You've been playing.
He didn't learn how to play
years.
until he got with Moses. Like, they had this shit called downtown Houston. They had this shit called the Fun Day Recreation Center, right? And it was like in the summertime, it was kind of like where all the dudes went to play because a lot of people came down there because they own homes and shit in Houston. So NBA players from all over, they would come down there and play in the summer. And so Moses, he played down there, and he brought Hakeem down there to play. And these were legit NBA dudes. Like, and Hakeem came down there and he was dominating. And this was at the, when they were playing street ball type shit. And so then he started working with Moses, and then it was over.
I mean, you like a guy who just won an MVP, just won a title with Philly too in that time span, and you come over, you've been hooping 3 years,
right?
And you can at least keep up. Because I remember reading his autobiography, he was like, Moses gave me hell,
right?
But look what it did,
right?
Iron sharpens iron.
Iron sharpens iron. He was tough, but
So they got the Twin Towers, and then it looks like there's about to be a dynasty almost right off the bat because 86 finals. I mean, first of all, upset the Showtime Lakers.
Yeah, and they beat the Lakers twice. Like the first time in the 81 when they beat the Lakers too. That was when they had Magic and Nixon and all them.
That's right. That was in the last season, the winning time. They just showed that winning time.
Right, and then they beat them here on that last second shot, but they dominated that series. Like, it was Hakeem was killing that in that series. Like, him and Ralph, they were killing in that series. So
so what do you think in like the end of that series, the Celtics series? obviously they came up short, lost in 6. But
Still
you
hate
got
the
to be
Celtics.
thinking good about the first of all, you're like, man, these motherfuckers right here. I already hate y'all.
Dude,
But you got to be feeling all right heading into the next season because you're like, all right, our time's coming, right?
yeah, they but then Ralph started getting hurt a lot.